Stand by now for See It Now with Edward R. Murrow, which originates in Studio 41 in New York City. Alcoa, Aluminum Company of America, in cooperation with CBS Television, presents the distinguished reporter and news analyst Edward R. Murrow in See It Now, edited and produced by Mr. Murrow and Fred W. Friendly. A weekly presentation of Aluminum Company of America, the nation's leading producer of aluminum. Now, speaking to you from the control room of Studio 41 is the editor of See It Now, Edward R. Murrow.
Good evening. We would acknowledge the receipt of a considerable number of communications in the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks and say our thanks both for the criticisms and the compliments. We shall hope to get round to answering them in due course. Last night, Secretary of State Dulles spoke to the nation, and he said communist domination of Indochina and Southeast Asia would be a grave threat to the whole free community. And he added, the United States feels that the possibility of this threat should not be passively accepted, but should be met by united action. Mr. Dulles was speaking not only for American ears, but for French ears as well. The war in Indochina is as controversial in France as the war in Korea used to be in this country. 2 days before Mr. Dulles' speech, our reporter Dave Schoenbrunn and our cameraman Bill McClure went out to listen at random in a wholly unscientific survey of French opinion on this subject. They stopped first to talk with Paul Reynaud, who was the Premier of France in 1940 when that country fell to Germany.
Tonight, a great battle is raging. In the North Vietnam jungle, the soldiers of France are fighting and dying. 14 years ago, in another battle, even more grave, I telephoned to President Roosevelt when the German panzers were invading France, you remember. I telephoned to President Roosevelt to appeal for planes. Today, it is to the American public that I'm speaking, that I make an appeal. Not for planes, which you are giving us, but for something much more precious and perhaps more difficult for you to give, your understanding. The other day, President Eisenhower spoke of this battle, and particularly of Colonel de Castries. Indeed, he's a magnificent fighting man. And he has got something to live up to. He's a descendant of General Lafayette, a man you Americans know. Not so long ago, I visited the battlefields of Indochina and saw these jungle fortresses and the terrible conditions in which our men are fighting there. Let me give you an idea. First of all, this is Indochina. Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. The battle is raging here in Dien Bien Phu, not far from the Chinese border. This is a flat land surrounded by hills covered with jungle all around. It's like a bowl, and the enemy is up here on the rim with their guns pointing down, or as you Americans say, they are looking down our throats. A terrible position. For 3 days and nights, the enemy poured shells upon these positions, and the terrible surprise that cost us these positions was the size of these shells. They were 105s, and in great number. It is new evidence of the enormous efforts that China is making to keep war going. I agree with Mr. Dulles when he says that Russian plans have not changed and that we must arm ourselves. You understand now that with our army tied down in Indochina, we cannot feel secure at home. That is why France demanded the Conference of Geneva and why it must succeed. We must persuade China to stop sending those cannons to Indochina. That is the only way, I say the only way, to end that war. Our Prime Minister, Lanier, has promised the French people to end that war, just as General Eisenhower promised you, American people, to end the Korean War. And our war is already 7 years old. That is why tonight I am appealing not just for planes, but for something more precious and perhaps more difficult to give: your understanding. Is this too much to ask you?
That was Paul Reynaud speaking about the war in Indochina, 3 days before Secretary Dulles' speech of last night. From Mr. Reynaud's office, we went down to the banks of the Seine, where fishing and politics are always in season.
I've been asking a lot of people around here what they think of the war in Indochina. Could you talk to me about that?
I think that we must go on till the victory. I think it's possible.
That might take a long time.
Yes, sure. It will take a long time, but we must go on.
Well, I wonder if you could ask your friend here, the fisherman, what he thinks about Indochina.
What he thinks?
Yeah.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de la guerre d'Indochine?
Bah, je voudrais bien que ça se termine le plus tôt possible.
He wishes the war ended as soon as possible.
Well, I've heard that from most people.
Bon, alors, thank you very much. Monsieur, merci, eh? Bonne chance.
Bon, vous terminez?
No, that's
Nearby, a houseboat and a model with a parasol and an opinion.
Pardon, monsieur, excusez-moi, je parle avec mademoiselle, je vous interromps.
Oui, faites.
Well, excuse me then, what do you think about Indochina?
Well, I wish for the end of the war in Indochina just the way you Americans wish for the end of the war in Korea. But you see, we are fighting and helping the Vietnam to fight for their freedom in Indochina because they cannot by themselves fight the army of Ho Chi Minh. And so we're not only defending our selfish purposes, it's a war for everybody's freedom.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry to have interrupted.
No, ça va. Bon.
Almost everyone has friends or relatives in Indochina, and the argument is everywhere.
You know, Southeast Asia may be very important for the strategy, but to us, Europe is much more important, and we are now losing Europe in Southeast Asia.
Next, Schönbrunn went to Jean-Jacques Servan-Schreiber, editor of Express, and violently anti-government.
It was a great tragedy when the American government and the American people changed their mind on Indochina. You wanted the French army to leave Indochina and give birth to a national and independent government. You were absolutely right. That was what the British did in India, what you did yourself in the Philippines, the Dutch in Indonesia. It is the only sensible course if we want to keep friends in Asia. Instead of that, our governments finally convinced you that you had to support our fight against the Indo-Chinese people, or so-called rebels. It was a tragically wrong policy. My second point is that this war is also a fantastic gift to Russia. For one obvious reason, it keeps France in a permanent state of military and economic weakness. Our best officers, most of our technicians, nearly all our pilots are engaged in this endless war 10,000 miles from Paris. The French army is bled white. That prevents us from accepting any real and intimate partnership with Germany. It also helps very efficiently the French Communist Party propaganda. I put it to you that the Indochina expedition is Russia's greatest asset to keep the French Communist Party strong and to prevent the unity of Europe. To conclude, I believe that we shall very soon have a government in France that will decide to put an end to the war. When that day comes, you must know that we are at last on the eve of becoming a strong and faithful ally in the Atlantic Partnership, that we shall cease to beg for your money and your help, and that we shall keep our promises on the decisive battlefront in Europe.
Editor Servan Schreiber speaks of the European defense community, and Paul Reynaud speaks of understanding. But he might perhaps remember that understanding is a two-way street. The United States was promised that a vote would be taken in the French Assembly on the European defense community before the meeting in Geneva next month. That vote has not been taken, and it is not likely to be taken. For Americans, as for Frenchmen, action is considerably more understandable than words. Time now for Alcoa.
As thousands of people visit General Motors' giant Motorama on its cross-country tour, more and more of these people are being impressed by the distinctive styling and individual design that makes GM a leader in America's automotive industry. Alcoa is proud to contribute to this leadership, proud of the part it plays in the automobiles of today and the automobiles of tomorrow. Cadillac's car of tomorrow is highlighted by its aluminum top and its chrome-plated aluminum wheels. To enhance the beauty of this futuristic Pontiac, aluminum has been used for grills, louvers, and interiors. Oldsmobile's version of tomorrow's car features wheel covers and hubcaps of aluminum. Chevrolet's car of the future makes extensive use of gleaming aluminum trim. Buick uses aluminum too. For many of GM's automobiles of tomorrow, Alcoa aluminum has been used for dashboards, instruments, and insignia, window trim and molding, grids and grills. Alcoa aluminum is also used in General Motors' sensational new experimental car, the Firebird. Powered by a gas turbine, it contains large amounts of aluminum plate, extrusions, and aluminum sheet. Its rocket-shaped nose is aluminum. Its wheels are fitted with aluminum brake drums. Even parts of the tail assembly are made of light but strong aluminum alloys. Besides its cars of tomorrow, Motorama's Look to the Future also introduces the Frigidaire modern kitchen. This exciting kitchen of tomorrow uses aluminum almost everywhere, including the kitchen sink. The new concept range and the aluminum framed kitchen cabinets that lower at the wave of a hand. At General Motors' exciting Motorama, wherever you look, you'll find aluminum, the modern metal for modern industry. Aluminum from the nation's first and leading producer, Alcoa, Aluminum Company of America.
Since March 1st, we have been living in the hydrogen age. Next week, we will see the first films of a hydrogen explosion. The other day, we received a letter from Val Peterson, Chief of Civil Defense. It reads in part, would it be possible to have a re-showing of your program on the simulated bombing of New York? I think, in view of recent developments, that sometime within the next few days would be very desirable if it could be arranged. Mr. Peterson is referring to an exercise in which B-29s flying from England simulated an atom bomb attack on New York City. Howard K. Smith was in the lead B-29 and this reporter flew in the jet interceptors. When we did the film originally, it was assumed that the aircraft attacking would be carrying atom bombs. Now it would be reasonable to assume that they would be carrying hydrogen bombs of very considerably more potency than the old atom bombs. This story begins with a briefing at an airfield not far from London, at Upper Hayford in Oxfordshire.
The purpose of this mission today, gentlemen, is to test the capability of the Eastern Defense Forces by making a simulated attack on New York City by using B-29s. At 1300 Zebra, you will rendezvous with 2 other B-29s.
The B-29 was selected for the mission because it is almost identical to the Russian Tu-4, which was modeled after a B-29 captured in the late war.
It is now X hours as our B-29 moves down the runway on this field in England. Loaded to the turrets, it's a long, slow, hard takeoff. We're airborne at X hours and 45 seconds. X hours and 30 minutes. Below us on the right, Pembroke. The tip of Wales, the last dry land we shall see until North America. 2,400 miles of deep Black Sea ahead of us. We're chasing the sunset westwards across the Atlantic.
The flight will take 20 hours. This one went by way of the Great Circle route. It is more likely that an enemy attack would come over the Arctic and Canada. During the long night, the plane stays at 12,000 feet, but it begins to lose altitude as it nears the coast.
X plus 13 hours, the USA at last, the coast of Maine near Bangor. Down to 1,000 feet. The purpose to steal under the radar net, to escape detection, scrape the treetops in the hope of reaching the target area unspotted.
This radar antenna, and many like it, revolves 24 hours every day. But an enemy plane can conceal itself by coming in low and letting the curvature of the earth or high points of the land protect him.
At X plus 18 hours, over the agreed rendezvous point, 2 other B-29s who will accompany us on the rest of this mission. We're now down to about 500 feet to make doubly sure about that radar net.
The low-flying planes stay away from the big towns, but sooner or later have to pass over a community. This is East Millinocket, and these ladies are volunteer ground observers. They get no pay.
Aircraft flash, 3, multi-motor, very low, Fox Queen, 2, 4, red.
All multi-engine planes they see, regardless of size or markings, they report to Bangor Filter Center. At Bangor, every observed flight is given a number and charted. This one becomes number 211.
3 miles southeast of observation post, flying southwest. Check, thank you.
Calling radar number 4.
Next, Flight 211 reaches radar 4, a plotting center far up the New England coast.
Plotter, I have an initial plot for you.
Roger.
It is in George Queen, 2142.
George Queen, 2142.
Right. Its direction is southwest.
Direction southwest.
3 aircraft. Let's make track 211 unknown. Well, let's scramble blue flight on a heading of 230 at 1,000 feet.
This is Ed Scott in a T-33 jet taking off alongside with the F-86s. Takeoff time, 10:28. We had no briefing before scrambling and taking off. If radar or ground observers spots the enemy, they'll notify us and give us locations and directions.
Been over Maine 10 minutes now, no sign of U.S. planes.
This cabin was designated as a ground observation post. A sighting from here would have given the jet pilots something to work from. This one is abandoned and silent, and it makes it tough on the pilots.
1 hour and still no interceptions. My pilot has just told me we are now returning to base.
Back at Bangor Filter Center, they give up on 211, not knowing whether it is an enemy or a friendly plane off course. This observation post on this fire tower might have helped, but it was unmanned.
At X plus 18.5 hours, we're over the Merrimack River, just a little ways from Groton, and on the left is Boston.
This church is southwest of Boston. After more than 70 minutes over U.S. soil, a second spotting is made by an observer. Her call travels down the coast to the New Haven Filter Center, where Flight 211 becomes alive again.
Very low. No delay.
The filter center calls Radar 12, which plots all planes in the southern New England area. Radar 12 calls for jet interceptors, scrambles a flight of all-weather F-94s at Otis Air Force Base on Cape Cod.
Operation Scramble Red Flight.
Said a jet pilot to a reporter. Getting a little old for this sort of thing, aren't you? Jet pilots fly faster and run faster than the rest of us. Our recording gear was strapped in where the radar set usually goes. A jet leans you back against the seat when they pour on the power for takeoff. There isn't any great sense of speed. Seems that someone is just pulling the ground back from under you.
Roger, Red Leader, airborne with 4 chicks, port to 350, over.
At X plus 19.5 hours, Bridgeport, Connecticut, just below and ahead of us.
Roger, wind steady on 350, bogey at 2 o'clock, 30 miles, over.
Pinkerton says they have picked up the strangers on their radar. Our flight leader has picked them up, but we cannot see them visually. Only broken clouds below.
Red Leader, airspeed 350, Angel 7.
Pinkerton is moving these jets around in the sky as though they were tied to the end of a string, telling them to change course, to reduce speed, to increase speed, trying to bring us in contact with the bogies. We've got a tally-ho now and a visual contact with the B-29s. Now, for the first time, pilot eyes have seen them and identified them as B-29 type aircraft.
Well, Strategic Air Command has no B-29s operating in the New York area. Anti-aircraft, New York area. 3 B-29 type aircraft approaching New York City. Alert your batteries. Civil Defense, New York City, red alert.
From the moment of the alert, their radar scope will track the bombers and aim the 120-millimeter guns.
With the target perhaps 20 minutes away, we're climbing, still climbing, to attain bombing altitude. The interceptors are coming in at us now. By all calculations, that would have got one of our planes, or we would have gotten him.
Now we're up on the left wing. For the moment, I've lost the B-29s in the clouds, but the pilot obviously can see them.
This B-29 is not coming toward us. This is our gun camera as we attacked it at 550 miles per hour. And if it had been the real thing, the bomber would have been shooting back. Splash 1 B-29, shot down.
Now we're going in on a beam attack. The gun cameras are firing and we pull up terrific speed. When he pulls out, there's a tendency for things to blur a little.
We're setting the craft now for the bombing target, which is only minutes away. Bombardiers at the bomb site. The plane will be set on its course now and won't vary no matter what happens, spiders or not. We go right up to Manhattan Island and to the bombing target.
The anti-aircraft men reported they had the bombers in their sights more than long enough to get them, but there was no way of proving it. And even at this point, the bombers would have hit something.
X plus 20 hours and we're in the target area on time. Just below us is the Harlem River. Across the East River to the left, you can see Triborough Bridge and Hell's Gate. Laid out before us like a carpet is Manhattan Island, and off in the hazy distance is the target itself, the Empire State Building. And out before us now is Central Park. Our bombardier says that he has decided to drop the bomb about 1 mile from the target to allow for wind and the angle. The door. We're going to drop the bomb at the end of Central Park.
Our number 2 camera is out in the bomb bay. That thin white line you're looking at is where the bomb bay doors don't quite mesh.
We're about 10 seconds from the bomb release.
Bomb bay doors coming open.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, bombs away.
The number of enemy bombers that could get through would depend upon many factors, the weather, the state of our defenses, and so forth. But the Air Force has estimated that 2/3 of a determined, driven-home attack would get through to the target. There are blind spots in our radar screen. The members of the Ground Observer Corps, the people who work in the filter centers, are not wasting their time. For they, like that French colonel commanding at Dien Bien Phu, stand ready to protect the free world against the clear and present threat of communist aggression. Good night and good luck from Alcoa.